Hi, I'm David Coulthard, and welcome to F1 Unscripted, part of a series of interviews for Heineken Non-Race Sundays. Well, I'm very excited to say that my guest this week is my former boss and current team principal of Aston Martin Red Bull Racing, Christian Horner. Christian, how are you?
Very good, DC. How are you? Good to see you.
Yeah, well, I've gone less hairy and you've gone more hairy.
I know, exactly. I think it's that one opportunity you've got to explore with non-shaving, because you haven't got to be anywhere, haven't got to see anybody. Just obviously these Zoom chats and video conferencing, but it'll all be back to normal next week when we're back in the office.
How has been non-race Sundays for you? I know I've been sort of watching reruns of old Grand Prix and generally enjoying a cool beer with friends, but you've got the family around you. Have you been thinking of what races would have been had we been at Grand Prix?
We did our own version of the Monaco Grand Prix around the kitchen last weekend. There was a daring lunge into turn one past the kitchen table by Olivia, my 6-year-old daughter. But yeah, I mean, there's been time for obviously plenty of reflection, but also the upside has been plenty of time with the family. So I've taught her how to ride a bike without stabilizers. My young son's done about 24 miles on a tractor, which he's fairly obsessed with at the moment. I don't think I've mowed as much grass since I was at school. The positive side, as I say, has been the time spent with family, so that you don't get during the course of a Grand Prix season. Of course, when we get going again, I think we could be on the road almost continually between now and the end of the year. So it's been nice to have that time, but I think everybody's now ready to get going, get racing. What will hopefully be the first race in Austria in July.
So I just briefly want to look back before we move forward. And, we worked together for a few years at the end of my race career. And when you mentioned there about how you're used to walking around the factory, I think that was the thing that I found very interesting. I'd spent 9 seasons at McLaren, and I don't remember ever going around the entire factory with Ron, but I do remember you would have these sort of specific sit-downs with the heads and the group on a weekly basis. You really were sort of integrating yourself into all of the departments. So was that a conscious decision you were making back then of, this is how I want to run a Formula One team? Or was this something that you had carried through from your Formula 3000 team as it was then and was just part of how you like to manage people?
I was only using the skills that I had. I'd never been on a management training course in my life. I was an ex-racing driver that started a team and built that team, and I built the team in Formula 3000, the category then below Formula One, as I would have liked to have driven for a team. And for me, teamwork's all about people, and getting the most out of people is about communicating with people. And I'm a firm believer in that, and I've always stuck by that. So, I don't lock myself away in an office. I want to know what's going on out in the business, and I want to feel that people can approach me.
It reminds me of when I was called to a meeting with Ron Dennis, and let's say for argument's sake it was at 10 a.m. And I go there to his office, and he had 2 PAs lined up because he was doubly as busy as you might be. And they said he had a call that was running over. And I said, okay, well, I'll just nip to see my engineer, because it was just a couple of doors across. So when he's ready, give me a call. So about 20 minutes or so later, I get called by his PA to come and see Ron. I go in his office, and he doesn't say hello, and he's shuffling things in his desk, and he sits down, and then he looks at me and he goes, when I tell you 10 o'clock, you be outside my office and you sit there and you wait until... And I thought I was being efficient with my time, going off and doing something else. But obviously, whatever the call he was on was not a good one, because he decided to take out me. So anyway, you don't have a holding area outside your office. People can come and give you a nod.
Everybody's different. I had huge respect for Ron, and the passion that he had, and he could be properly scary in some meetings. He had these veins on his neck that when he got really angry, they sort of come up like this. But he got real passion, and what worked for him. I remember him and Flavio. You couldn't meet 2 more different personalities, but in actually what they were doing at the time. When they were competing against each other for the World Championship in 2005-06, I think it was, they were achieving exactly the same things, just in very, very different styles. And I remember looking at these two and thinking, there's no set routine for success here, because you've got Ron, whose folders are even immaculate. Martin Whitmarsh used to turn the pages for him at the meetings, almost open his pen. And then you got Flavio that got half his lunch down his t-shirt, and it was all about the show and the business, and engineers were criminals, and it was all about rock and roll and having fun and the show. And they both achieved incredible things, but they were the complete antithesis of each other. So I remember looking at these two guys thinking, there's no set way here. So I'm just going to go my own way, and I'll apply my own methodology and see how that fares. And it's neither Flavio nor Ron.
Well, I think what's interesting, and again, as we work together, then the fact that you were a racing driver before you decided to go into ownership and team management, then you do know the challenges that the driver's going through when you're on track. And I've always felt that gives you an insight that is invaluable when it comes to dealing and managing the drivers. Before we get into some of the more difficult management challenges that you've had, now clearly when I was there it was an absolute breeze, but I do remember when you mentioned Ron Dennis's veins popping on his neck. I only ever saw that with you once, and it was the Chinese Grand Prix where I was given the instruction to move over from Mark. We were at different phases of a transitional wet
strategies. That's right.
And I decided not to do it. And then we had a discussion about it afterwards. And I think I said something which you didn't appreciate. And I remember your neck changed color. And actually, to me, because I was towards the end of my career, I didn't take offense in that. It was for me, it was an empowering moment, because it really showed your passion. Because it's easy, if you're relatively calm in your management style, for people to see that as some kind of weakness. But actually, there's a steeliness there. I only ever saw it once. Have you ever had to get the neck changing color? Like, I guess an obvious example would be Turkey 2010. Where,
that was another one. I think that I'm one of those characters that things build and build and build and build and build, and then there's something that triggers a complete over. I mean, it happens very seldom. I think the last one was Azerbaijan with Max and Daniel, and I remember absolutely losing it with the two of them when we got back into the briefing room. And I sort of saw a bit of Adrian was in the room as well. I remember he looked slightly shocked, and these two kids are looking at me, as if I was some hugely scary looking teacher or something, having a go at them, because they just thrown away, obviously a huge amount of points for the team. And I think that was probably the last time I've had an over rev.
Yeah. Well, you had some practice though ahead of that. And I mentioned Turkey 2010, and I think by the powers of technology, they'll be able to help you relive that with some
really?
So that was a difficult moment, your drivers coming together. So was that maybe a slightly calmer version of what happened in Azerbaijan?
Pretty much 10 years ago, I think. Yeah, it was 10 years ago, pretty much this weekend, I think, because we just won the Monaco Grand Prix, had a 1-2 finish there. It doesn't get better than that. And then this happened. And, with hindsight, you never want to see your drivers do that. And, at the time, I remember feeling that Mark hadn't allowed Sebastian enough space because he'd been closing him down. But at the same time, Sebastian had moved. And when you look at it, Mark has, squeezed him, but not unfairly there. And Sebastian has just been a bit too greedy. And, the desires of two guys overtaking that of the team. And the one thing that we always ask our guys is to give each other space. And I think that, on that day, Sebastian should have been a bit more patient, and he would have got the result that he wanted.
Well, in quick succession, leading into again, because, we could easily talk about all the successes, but I'm particularly interested in management and how you get the best out of people. And it was Malaysia where we had the what's now become famous in the sport, the multi-21 scenario. Yeah. So, that was Sebastian really putting his own personal desires for victory beyond that of whatever agreement you had made. So again, how did you feel and how did you deal with that? Was it sitting the two of them down again? Is that the key, making sure that they both hear the same thing at the same time?
Well, I think the difference between that one was that there'd been a huge build-up. I mean, tensions between Mark and Seb pretty much from that Turkey incident in 10 had only grown. And then, of course, Sebastian started winning world championships. And we got to the end of the 2012 championship where it went down to the wire in Brazil. And Seb had qualified behind Mark. It had been a wet, dry session and we'd missed the window, blah, blah, blah. And we'd asked Mark to play team that day and support the team in trying to win the world championship with Seb. And, he'd squeezed him on the run down to turn one and it had all got, Sebastian felt he'd taken, too many liberties with him. So there you had this whole, emotion that rolled over from that 12 season into 13. So when Sebastian had got a new set of tyres on behind Mark, and the Pirellis were so fragile at that time of year in 2013, we'd lost the first race in Australia. I think Kimi had won it. And then we'd turn up in Malaysia. We got ourselves into a 1-2 position. And it was right, okay, all bets are off now. Let's just bring these cars home, nurse the tyres, get to the finish. And so Multi-21 was a code for, very simple, car two ahead of car one. Multi-12 would have been the other way around. And the instruction was given to both drivers. And Sebastian kept setting purple sectors. And I could see exactly what was unfolding in front of us because there was all this, as I say, frustration carried over from the end of the 12 season. And there was no way that he was not going to have a go at winning that race. So
Sebastian, multi-map 2-1, multi-map 2-1.
The instructions were given. We reinforced them. I discussed them with him, but Sebastian had the advantage, and quite a significant advantage, of a new set of tyres that he'd carried over from qualifying. So he got a big grip advantage. Plus, he was on a different compound. So he had a huge advantage over Mark at this stage of the race. And of course, he went for the pass. Mark was very upset about it. The team was up. I was really pissed off about it because, he'd ignored the orders from the pit wall, and seeing your two cars racing like this, you can end up with another Turkey situation. And the priority at this stage is to achieve, maximum points, for the team. So, it was very frustrating. We spoke about it afterwards, about the importance of team, but their relationship was broken by this point. You can see, in the debrief room after the race, emotions running high, but the relationship between the two of them by this stage was so bad. So I remember, we finished first and second in the race, and everybody was pissed off. It was ridiculous. We've beaten Lewis Hamilton. Remember those days? Yeah. We're up there, having finished first and second, and there's not, Seb's actually upset because I think he's recognised that, well, maybe I made a mistake here, because the reception he got afterwards wasn't perhaps what he expected. Mark was pissed off. The team was pissed off. It was the most unhappy 1-2 finish we've ever had.
So this is really fascinating to me, because I've never been in the role that you are, in that you understand the natural desire of a racing driver. You've been there, okay, maybe not under the spotlight of intensity of Formula One, but you explained there, you could see what was happening before it actually unfolded out on track. So as the drivers today that you manage get younger, do you really start to feel that, not only are you sort of seeing what's about to happen out on the racetrack, are you seeing them as young boys to young men go through the transitional phase as well? And do you get involved in trying to assist and guide, or is it purely professional? They're racing drivers, irrespective of age, they're there to deliver, and in the best interests of the team.
Well, I think with experience, you just gain more roundness, and I think that the driver's instincts remain the same. So Max has all the same instincts that Seb had, that that you had, when you were racing against Mark and so on. And I think that those characteristics remain the same. The experience is different, and sometimes the youngsters, they have to learn the hard way. And so both Sebastian in the early days and Max, they got beaten up a bit for mistakes or perhaps slight misjudgments that they made. But most important thing is to learn from it. And I think in both of their cases, they absolutely did. I remember, Monaco with Max in 2016, I think it was, where we had a really dominant car, chance of a victory, and obviously he put it in the wall in P3 and then didn't have the chance to compete. And I think it was after that point he really went away and reflected and turned up in Montreal, a different driver, and then put an incredible streak of results together. So inevitably young guys are going to make mistakes. They're going to have incidents, and I think my role is to try and help guide and put an arm around the shoulder where it's needed, or be a bit firmer where it's needed, to try and guide them, and just pass on the benefit of experience. And I think the useful thing in my career, whilst I never drove at your level, or certainly Sebastian or Max, is, but having sat in the cockpit is actually a pretty lonely place when you're sitting in there. You need to believe 100% when you're sitting in there looking around the people around your car and your team and the pit wall. You need to feel that they're 100% behind you, that they've got your back. And I think that's so important, because I remember being in that situation in teams when I was driving, where I think, well, really, what is the decision maker behind this? So I think transparency and communication, again, talk about things. Why did we do this? Why did that happen? Is the most important thing.
Yeah, I think it's one thing that Formula One has taught me, the power of the debrief, as you say, the power of communication and discussion afterwards. It's not about the success, celebration. It's about the analysis of that success and what could have been, what tripped you up.
Yeah, I mean, I remember, Sebastian's debriefs would take about 2 hours. We'd be half an hour in and he's just completed the formation lap and tested his drinks bottle. But the detail he used to go into in recounting every stage of the race, every stage of the tyre. It was way too much information for us to be able to even digest, but it was a useful exercise for him as well to go through. Recounting what could have been done better, what could have been done well. I remember, Mark would take about 15 minutes to do the entire race on the other side of the table. Again, different styles for different people. And it's funny, as Max matures, the information coming from him gets deeper and deeper, because his understanding of, the wind changed on lap 6 to 8, as I was approaching turn 4 and 5, their ability to recount details, is phenomenal.
It's interesting that because I've not sat in that environment with him debriefing. It's interesting you say that you would really spend a long time giving detail, because with Adrian Newey, I remember early on working with him, giving him every detail of the entry, the mid corner, the exit, everything, every event that was going on as I went through the corner. And this was back in the Williams day. Yeah. And I got to the end of it and he looked at me and he said, "What do you need to go faster?" Mm-hmm. And I remember thinking, well, that's probably the understeer. And he went, "Okay, we'll fix that, shall we?" And he was very good at focusing down. Because as you know, when a racing car is on the limit, it's an event, isn't it? The event, the apex, you just make it, you just get on the power at the right time. So being on the limit is.
What I find very interesting about Adrian in a debrief is that it's almost like a session with a doctor, and he's going through, right, what are your symptoms? And so what he again wants out of the driver is he's going for those, exactly as he asked you at the time, is, what are your key symptoms here? Forget the other stuff. What do you need to go faster at this point in the lap? Is it your entry that's compromising you? Is it the exit? What is it? What have you got? And that's fascinating, because we've got all the boffins that are looking at every variance in any pressure. We've got over 150 sensors on the car that are looking at all these. We've got more data than we've ever had. But Adrian is very much focused still on what the arse of the driver is telling him. What that sense is. What do you need to go quicker? Because yes, we've got all the data that tells us what's happening, but it doesn't tell us why.
It's interesting. I never thought of Adrian as a doctor, but maybe after this I'll do a Zoom call and see if you can give me a diagnosis and a small rash that I was too embarrassed to.
I'll be careful with that.
Right, I'm going to slightly put you on the spot, and I'm conscious of time here. And I'll understand if you don't want to divulge, because we're ahead of a very competitive Formula One season. But any regrets from the tremendous success that's been there? There's going to have been a few, I wish I hadn't done that type scenarios. And hopefully you don't say signing me, but I'll accept that if you do say that.
So that was one of the best things we ever did. I think that, with you in Indianapolis, I regret not doing that race. That was incredibly difficult when we pulled off the grid because it just felt that there was things going on that were bigger than the sport that day. There's politics between the FIA and the teams, and it felt like situations were being used, and so I regret not racing then. What else? I regret not having the tyres ready for Daniel in Monaco in 2016 when we got a victory pretty much nailed.
A little word, if I may, on your former driver. He won his 4 championships with you. Things haven't as yet worked out at Ferrari. That's not to say that he won't have a great final season. Do you have a feeling on Seb's decision or Ferrari's decision? Do you have an insight that you could share with people who are having to experience non-race Sundays with us as to what he may have lined up? I threw out there a theory that maybe Aston Martin could be a direction for him and take a different role within a team. Do you think that's a possibility, or should I stick to punditry?
No, look, I think Sebastian, he's a very deep thinker. He will have given this a huge amount of thought. I've got no doubt about that. What he's achieved in his career is phenomenal. So if he were to decide that there's not a competitive drive available to him at the end of this year and he calls it a day, he could even take a year out if he wanted. He has a young family. He's achieved. He's one of the most successful drivers in the history of the sport. In saying that, he's still pretty young. He's still in his early 30s. He's still phenomenally quick, and maybe Mercedes will fancy the headache of having him and Lewis together. It'd be great for all of us to see and witness. From a team point of view, that would be a lot to take on. He's a great driver, and as I said, I'm sure he's given us a lot of thoughts, and all we can do is wish him the best. I think Formula One will be, worse off if he's not there, but you have to respect his decision.
Well, Christian, thank you very much for your time and insights to your management style. You've probably got some homeschooling and some remote team principling to do. I'm retired for the day, so I'm going to have a Heineken. So I say cheers and see you at Grand Prix soon.
Very good. Cheers, DC.